Okay, good morning, everyone. This is Jorge Andrade from SIB Lima. Welcome to this webinar. Sorry for a few problems that we had at the beginning of this webinar, but let's start. Okay. Can you see my? I'm sharing my screen. Okay. So this webinar is organized by the CGI research program on root tubers of banana. We are the cluster on seed systems. Um, the title of the webinar is a tool that we have developed during the last few years. It's called the Multi Stakeholder Framework for intervening in RTB seed systems. It was prepared by myself, Jorge Andrade, Israel Navarrete. Israel is in Quito, Ecuador, Margaret Makiwan, and Nesai Mudeje from SIP Nairobi. Okay. So this is the outline of the webinar for today. I will present the tool for about 15 minutes. Okay. And Netsai will address the gender topic. Okay. How we included the gender perspective into the webinar. Then we will present an example from Ecuador for about 10 minutes. Israel Navarrete will present this. Then Margaret Makiwan will present the strengths and limitations about this framework. Then we will have 15 minutes for questions and answers, and then I will wrap up and propose some next steps for about 10 minutes. Okay, so this is the outline for today's webinar. So let's start with the introduction to the framework. Okay. So this is a bit of background. You know, if you have some experience working on roots, tubers, and banana, planting material or seed is problematic because degeneration, the accumulation of diseases, and the reduction in yield. This is degeneration. It's a huge problem in RTB seed systems. Also, low multiplication rates as compared to grain crops, for example. And also, the planting material is perishable, bulky, and expensive. So there are several challenges related to these topics. Then we have that most of the seed is provided by local farmer-based seed systems. More than 95% in some cases even 100%. There is no formal seed systems in some crops in some countries, for example. Then we have this the issue that most of these seed systems are very complex systems. We have many stakeholders, sometimes with conflicting interests. Okay, so this is something very common that we see actually. And also there is a renewed interest from donors to invest on RTB seed systems because usually these crops are very important for food security in developing countries. So what we see is that we need tools, for example, methodologies or approaches. One example is the framework that we are presenting today to help on the design, implementation, and evaluation of new interventions. Okay. So we have donors that are investing on seed systems of RTBs, and we need some conceptual direction on how to invest on these crops. So this is cluster CC 2.1. We are. Can you mute your mic, please? Be sure to mute your mic, please. Okay, so as I was saying before, we are in the CGI research program on root tubers and banana. This is RTB. We have 5 flagship programs. We are located in SIP2, which is productive varieties and quality seeds. We are a cluster on quality seeds and access to improved varieties. This is what we call the cross-crop cluster. We are developing tools and methodologies to help other clusters to improve their outcomes and impacts. Okay, so we have a lot of connections with clusters of crop-specific clusters in flagship 2. So the idea is that developed with the users the tools, and they use these tools, for example, this framework, to improve their interventions. Then we have also connection with clusters in other flagships, for example, in CC 3.1, the pest and disease management cluster, with cluster 5.3, gender. We have a lot of connections with the gender team. led by Sai Mudeje. We have received a lot of input from them, and we also provide feedback on their approaches. And we are also collaborating with the CC 5.4 scale. Margaret, a project now that is scaling up a technology related to sweet potato seed systems. So this is a brief overview of in which place we are located in RTB. So this is the tool. This is the multi-stakeholder framework for RTB for intervening in RTB seed systems. So we trying to address the challenges that I mentioned before. We developed this tool over the last few years. Matrix, okay? So we have, in the first column, we have the stakeholders of a certain seed system. So we have from policymakers to seed users, the whole range of stakeholders. So as you can see here, we have many of them, and sometimes with this is quite common actually to have conflicting interests among these stakeholders. And we have in the first row, we have the functions of a seed system. This is related to seed security, and these concepts come from food security. So we have availability, we have accessibility, and
I just helped myself. They are not there. I went to
please be sure to mute your mic. Charles, I can hear you. Charles, can you please mute your mic, please? Thank you. So the idea is to this tool help us to have the perspectives, for example, of policymakers. Sorry, Charles, please make sure to mute your mic. I can hear you. Charles, it's okay. Please mute your mic. Okay, thank you.
By wọ́n send wa ní 85 coppers lọ́dún yìí.
Just a moment, I'm trying to mute one of the participants because it's very noisy. Just a moment.
So many people are here.
Well, that's right.
How they would find out we are here?
Please, I think it's goodwill for Mijere to please mute your mic.
Okay.
Okay, continue. Okay, so the idea is to use this tool to have to analyze, for example, availability, accessibility, and quality from the perspective of a certain stakeholder. So, for example, in this case, we can have the analysis from the perspective of policymakers. What is the perspective about availability, accessibility, and quality according to the perspective of policymakers? Or we can have the analysis on the other way. What is the availability regarding the perspectives of different stakeholders? So from policymakers to seed users. We have cross-cutting themes in mainly gender, also regulation analysis and sustainability. So Letsai is going to explain us how included the gender perspective into this framework. And also it's important to mention that this framework developed based on previous work from Tom Remington and Steve Walsh and other authors, and the seed security assessment, Sterling and John McGuire, okay? So we are building on the experience from previous scientists. The framework for analysis, okay? So if you want to plan a new intervention, or if you want to analyze an existing intervention or to evaluate a past intervention, you can use the framework. So for planning before a project, the framework can be used, and actually is being used to help us on to do the context analysis, have a first overview of what's happening in that seed system, understanding an existing seed system, identifying issues for intervention, and during the project or when a project has finalized, we can use the framework to analyze the intervention. The framework, as you can see, is a very simple tool, so it should be complemented with other methodologies coming from social sciences, for example, interviews, market studies, gender analysis, depending on the question that you want to answer, and also from biological sciences. So, for example, we will need to do experiments to assess the effect of seed quality or surveys to estimate the incidence or severity of a pest, etc. So the idea is to use the framework as a first tool, as a tool to first understand and describe an existing seed system or understand an intervention, and then you can use other methodologies, other tools to go deeper. Okay. So, for example, um, in each of these cells, we have actually questions that is helping us to frame. So, for example, here, regarding policymakers and varieties, ask the question, do regulations promote the use of native varieties? Okay. So this is for understanding the existing seed system. So we have in the user guide that you probably saw, we have a lot of questions proposed in the framework to understand an existing seed system. So, for example, this one. Also, we can use the framework to identify roles and functions of existing stakeholders. So, for example, in this cell, in quality and national research scientists, the function of the scientists could be identify key seed-borne pests and diseases. Okay. And also the framework, we have developed questions to identify bottlenecks within the seed system. So, for example, in the case of traders and affordability, we can identify that there is a potential bottleneck when we implement an intervention, and projects may distort existing seed markets with distributing free seed. Okay, so in the user guide, as I said before, you have a whole set of questions that help us to either understand an existing system or identify functions and bottlenecks of before the intervention. The framework, the first version of the framework is to mute your mics, please. The first version of the framework was validated using 13 case studies. These case studies were selected based on crops and based on scales. So we wanted to include cases from the 5 major RTB crops: potato, sweet potato, yam, cassava, and banana, and also at different scales. So, for example, we have interventions. The case of Compapa, for example, potato in Ecuador, it includes just 40, 50 farmers through multi-nations regional projects such as GLCI. So we use the framework to document the interventions that just finished and extract lessons and learning and knowledge sharing about these interventions. Okay, so this was the first use of the framework. We published an article. You will see in the resources section that I'm going to mention in a moment. We published an article about this, and also we have developed. We have a working paper describing in a lot of detail these 13 case studies. Current uses of the framework at the moment, or the framework was used in the last 1 or 2 years to, for example, analyze the outcomes and impacts of this project called Moranda Bora in the Lake Zone on sweet potato. So they had a workshop where they analyzed this project, and they invited several stakeholders that intervened during this project. So they analyzed the outcome and the impacts from this project. The framework is also being used now to understand existing potato seed systems in Ecuador. Israel Navarrete is going to describe this in a moment. Also, Connie Almekinders, for example, she used the framework to understand planting material sourcing practices of cassava farmers in Nigeria. This was done with Hemant Niturkar also with the Basics project. So they organized a workshop with several stakeholders, and they use the framework to understand what is happening with sourcing of this planting material. Also, the framework was used to understand seed practices and seed flows in sweet potato seed systems in Ethiopia. This was done by Margaret through several multi-stakeholders workshops. Also, elements of the framework can be used in India, for example, to understand an existing potato seed system. So we use the framework to develop the main questions before going to the partners. In SSA, we use some elements of the framework to analyze the current situation of rapid multiplication techniques for seed potato production. This was done with Monica Parker, Elmar, and Dieudonné. Okay, so let me introduce Netsai Mudeje. She's a gender expert, and she will talk us about some gender considerations that we included in the framework. Netsai, please go ahead. Netsai, are you there?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
Netsai.
All right. Thank you. I, yeah. So I think Jorge has talked about how the framework was developed and how it was used to analyze some cases. So part of that process, also the gender team also had some cases that we analyzed using that framework from a gender perspective. So what we found during this analysis were like we found like a number of interesting things. The first thing was that it was very clear that to understand food systems needed to comprehend gender and cultural norms related to resource distribution that may affect the ability of men and women to benefit from the food system. For example, if you are introducing new seeds and you don't take account of the resources that men and women have, for example, if women have access to settle in marginal lands and you only do your trials on plots that are managed by men, which may be more fertile than women's plots, that can actually present a problem that will not be responsive to the resources that women have. What we also found when we analyzing that framework was that issues of seed affordability and accessibility are often looked at in multiple perspectives. The fact is that they are not gender neutral because there are some like let's say some challenges from a gender perspective that can actually prevent either men or women from being able to afford or to access food. So those things they also need to be understood. And what we also found, I'm just going to give you like maybe three things, but there are many different things that aspects that we found in our analysis, is that it is important to understand social norms that are critical to the survival of RTBC systems. So, and these social norms can also include uh, they also include labor, negative or positively influence RTBC systems. So I basically what we thought was that okay, we needed from those angles, we needed to make sure that this framework could actually integrate gender aspects if you wanted RTBC like to be equitable for both men and women. So what we also found was that so the needs of women in sometimes poor families something integrated, leading to negative implications for also the functioning and sustainability of people. So from that perspective, what we decided then to introduce gender cost-cutting theme in the framework, and also kind of emphasize the need to understand the flexible the role and implication of gender core pillars of the citizens from availability, accessibility, and inclusion. So when you look at the new document that is right now, we are also trying to integrate some gender questions under or some gender approaches under the process. We have also developed some tools that can be used to look at the from a gender perspective, which are available in the toolbox that Jorge also said about. And we are also working with the team to also integrate them into other tools. So part of this process also, what we think that this framework can also contribute is promoting the collection and analysis of sex disaggregated data and the use of the results in designing of interventions. So it doesn't help us to just collect the sex disaggregated data if we are not going to analyze it. And analysis only will not help us if we are not going to use those results to help in design of interventions. So that is also something that we are also following throughout the framework. How do we collect data? How do we analyze it? And then how do we integrate it when we are developing our interventions? And also we need to, as part of this framework and gender mainstreaming, when you are also monitoring progress, we also need to monitor progress from a gender perspective. And we have also developed some papers, some working papers that also show how this monitoring can be done. And also when you are analyzing the outcomes and impacts of the seed systems using this framework that was introduced by Jorge, you also analyze the outcomes and impacts from a gender perspective. And I think the new version also has kind of shows us how that can be done and how we can look at it. So I think in brief, that is how we have tried to integrate gender into the framework.
Many thanks, Netzai. Okay, so just a final slide about before we close this part of introducing um, the framework is some resources. So I think we did a pretty good job developing several resources for how to use this tool, and also providing evidence on the usefulness of the tool. So we have a research paper. If you go to this site here, you will see all the links to all these resources. So we have a research paper that was just published just a few weeks ago. We have a user guide, and we have a version 2 of this user guide, including gender perspective with the help of Netzai. We have a blog that is describing the resources and also the tool. We have a very simple document. It's called a tool description sheet, where you can have a rapid overview of this tool, the framework. And also we are developing some reflection sheets. So the person who is using this tool, the idea is for him or to her to fill up this form and to reflect on the use of the framework. Okay. So this is all from me. So basically I introduced the framework, and the next step will be Israel Navarrete. He's going to describe an example from Ecuador on how he's using the framework. Okay. So Israel, please go ahead. Israel.
Can you hear me there?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, well, I have been using the framework to try to make a diagnostic of the seed system in Ecuador. And the province is where I'm working is called Cotopaxi, and you can see let's say, the symbol of the province, and that's the volcano Cotopaxi in Ecuador. And this is, let's say, the first step towards my PhD, so we can continue. You you can, well, on the left side of the slide, you can see that Cotopaxi is in the middle of the country, and we are working in 5 places inside of it, and it is because Cotopaxi is one of the provinces that which has the lowest production in the country, and also is the most poorest one. Can we continue? We have a really broad objective, let's say like that, that is trying to understand how social and biophysical drivers of the potato seed systems affect seed degeneration. However, the first step we need to make first is to understand the general characteristics of the potato seed systems in the province. So for that, we have used the framework, and as suggested in the guide, we have done literature reviews, collect available information, a lot of databases that were very spread around. I have talked to a lot of key informants, and I have developed some focus group discussions with farmers, with academics from a local university here, and with extension agents. I also have been walking around and talking to farmers about their seed system situation. Can we? So I would say the main results I have gotten from using the framework is first to understand that the formal seed system, let's say like that, only supplies 6% of certified seed, and only it does it for one variety that is the most common one here in Ecuador, called Super Chola. And basically everything starts from a glass house that was recently built. It's a 2 hectares glass house, and they have technologies such as aeroponics, semi-hydroponics, and cuttings over there to produce high quality seed. Then they distribute that basically to projects with the Korean corporation. Then they have some registered farmers that are able to acquire that seed coming from this glass house, and then the glass house also delivers seed to a station in Quito called Santa Catalina, which then they multiply the seed into registered and certified seed. Then they deliver that to the Ministry of Agriculture and to start delivering to farmers. The station agents usually what the station agents usually say how much seed they need, and then the NIAP glasshouse deliver them the amount of seed they need. That's one of the ways. The other way is already to set an amount of seed that the NIAP glasshouse needs to produce per year. After that, the extension agents of the Ministry of Agriculture deliver to farmer associations, and after a season, farmers are able to keep that seed, and then they start their own networks, like getting seed from feed stores, sharing with neighbors, sharing with relatives, and as well with the market. Initially, they say that there is not a study about seed demand, but there's actually a study that they estimate that the parent seed demand is between 5 tons and 41 tons of registered seed per year, and taking into account that farmers will renew their seed between 1.8 and 2.3 years. Can we continue? And it was interesting for me because in Ecuador, let's say we focus only one variety to try to strengthen the seed system. However, in Ecuador, we have nearly 50 varieties in the province. We have found around 30, 24 more or less until right now, but I'm sure there are more on the field. And it is easy to see that farmers have several varieties in the next graph. The first, we have the planting season on the left side, and we have the harvest season on the right hand side. And we can see that farmers mainly have seed during January, May, June, and July. And they mainly harvest on December, August, October, and July. However, you can see that if farmers plant during January, they are harvesting on August, July, June, and May. That means they have different varieties in the different varieties that they are planting and they are harvesting at different times during the year. The main need of seed they needed before January, although the let's say the government support usually arrives after January, but they need it by January and May. Can we continue, please? The main sources uh, for them to exchange the seed, let's say like that, I have taken two cases right now to present you. The first one is the government, and the second one is the farmers one. From the government, we can see that there are two important seed sources, the Ministry of Agriculture and the National Agricultural Research Center, who deliver the seed to extension agents. And these extension agents deliver then the seed to farmers associations. In average, the extension agents deliver seed to four organizations, for four farmers associations. After the farmers associations produce the certified seed, then 60% of the extension agents are helping them to set the seal between $25 and $35. On the other case, on the contrary, the seed exchange networks for farmers might look more, let's say, simple, but is really grounded on family aspects and people that lives close to you. So farmers usually renew their seed. In any case, they reduce their seed, not renew. They reduce their seed, but they mainly exchange their seed with neighbors, relatives, and sons and daughters. But by the time they need to receive seed, they mainly receive seed from relatives and neighbors, a little bit from sons and daughters, and a little bit from INEAP, that with the National Agricultural Research Center. And this, the coloration that you can see about the lines means that they are, the connection is stronger and that they deliver more seed than others. And you can see the difference between the sons and the daughters receiving seed and the sons of the daughters giving seed back to the farmers. And this is something that we are discussing right now with farmers, and it's because most of the sons and daughters are migrating to the city. We also ask them how much they are willing to pay. They say we would like to pay max $10 either for improved varieties or for native varieties. So we can see the contrast in terms of prices between the certified seed that the government is offering and the price that farmers are willing to buy. Can we continue? In terms of seed quality, basically farmers that are producing seed and in INEAP's glass house follow almost the same regulations, with the difference of that farmers, the seed that farmers are producing is inspected by seed inspectors, while for INEAP's glass house, it is inspected by either the Ministry of Agriculture and the Quality Control Agency from the government. For both of them, for either for farmers of the INEAP's glass house, the seed is inspected 4 times during the season, and the only thing that they differ is the index that the seed inspectors are using to say whether the seed is for registered seed or a certified seed. In the case of farmers, the index is higher, meaning that the seed inspectors allow the seed producers to have more diseases and pests accumulated on the tuber, while for the INEAP glass house, it is the index is lower. So in theory, this seed should be more clean. Interestingly, for when we talk with farmers and extension agents, we can see that they have a lot of visual characteristics that they are looking for in a quality seed. So first, absence of disease, insects, and physical damages. As well for farmers and extension agents, the shape of the tuber that needs to resemble the variety, the colors, and the size. However, a difference between both groups is the physiological status that is only observed by extension agents, and the number of eyes in the tuber and the crop stand is observed mainly by farmers. Important seedborne pests diseases that have been found in the region have been flea beetle, Indian weevil, tuber moth, thrips, rhizoctonia, and something that farmers call yellow blight that probably is PYBB and flies. Can we continue? So this project has been well is being developed by a lot of people. I would like to say thanks. So the Magnite Foundation, the International Potato Center, Wageningen University, in the National Agricultural Research Center, the Ministry of Agriculture, and the Technical University of Cotopaxi. Mhm.
Okay, thank you very much, Israel. So Israel basically used the framework and other methodologies to start diagnosing an existing seed system of potato in the highlands of Ecuador. Let's continue with Margaret McEwan about the strengths and the limitations of the framework. Margaret. Hello, Margaret? Hello? Margaret? Hello? Margaret? Can you hear me? Hello? Margaret, are you there? Margaret is trying to connect. Something is wrong. Just a moment, please. I think you can hear us, Margaret. I think it's just a matter of your mic. Just a moment, please. My mic is controlled from your end. Just a moment. Margaret, can you hear? Hello, Margaret.
Hear me now?
Okay, we can hear you. Okay.
Right, just a second. Okay, apologies for that. Can you hear me?
Yes, Margaret.
Yes. Okay, great. So it's great, everyone, to see we've got almost 30 people online from at least 3 continents. So I just want to go through quickly, as I've used up most of my time, some of the strengths and limitations of the framework that we've encountered so far, and in that way open up to some Q&A as well. I think one of the main strengths is that it's intuitively easy to understand the idea of availability, access, and quality to seed, and also looking at it from the perspective of a range of different stakeholders. So the feedback that we've had to date is that it is easy to understand the framework. And I think looking at the three functions, the three major of the functions of the seed system, it really provides a comprehensive and holistic overview of the seed system. And even people who have worked on, for example, sweet potato for many, many years, a breeder in southern Ethiopia said, after participating in a multi-stakeholder workshop that we did using the framework, I've learned things about the sweet potato seed system that I did not know before. I think what's really important is that often we remain in our disciplinary silos, and so that it provides the opportunity to look at the seed system from different perspectives, and particularly the farmer's perspective. And it's also possible to use the framework at different scales, at the scale of an agroecology or at a district or provincial level, and also a national level. So then moving on. I think what, again, many people have commented on is that it allows a much more systematic assessment, analysis, and understanding of the seed system. Often when there's different stakeholders, when there's different disciplines involved, it's difficult to bring all those perspectives into one place, and the framework does that. One of the comments from the basics workshop in Nigeria, which perhaps Hemant can comment on further, is that it allows people to look at the relationships between the different elements of availability, access, and quality of seed. And in that way, we can start to understand some of the key constraints to seed system functioning. What we also found is that by involving different stakeholders and looking at the seed system from a holistic point of view, it starts to identify what assumptions people are working with, and it's good that those assumptions start to become explicit. And then also, what are the potential points of conflict between different stakeholders that really would need to be addressed through either better communication or coordination. And I think from the clusters point of view and RTB, is really it provides a common language for us to work across disciplines and across crops and across countries. So of course there are some limitations. If we can move on. I think one of the first limitations that people often come up against is it's so broad. If we are taking such a comprehensive view of the seed system, it can become very broad. And so in that way, we might be losing some of the depth. But I think the strength is using the framework at an early stage, and then it helps us to explore what are the key issues, which we can then go into more in-depth studies to understand. I think as in any good tool, it needs to be adapted to the particular context it's been used in, and I think that's fair enough, but people need the confidence to do that and the time to do it before starting to use the tool. I think it's best when a multidisciplinary perspective or team can be used to apply the tool, because it really is open to using mixed methods, as Israel pointed out. You can use key informants, focus group discussions, you can use quantitative household surveys, transects. There's a lot of different methods that can be used within the framework. And that also highlights a potential challenge, which again, NetSci raised. We need to develop and improve our ways of analyzing data from a mixed methods approach. But that's something that we can work on in the future. So that's just highlighting some of the strengths and limitations, but I think now we can open up to Q&A, because I can see from the participants, we have people, Hemant from Nigeria, who's used the tool, also colleagues in southern Ethiopia. Ellie is here, and Peter Cronin from Ecuador. So over to you, Jorge.
Thank you, Margaret. Okay, so we're opening up for questions. Most of you have muted your mic, so be sure to unmute your mic or send me a message through the chat, and I will unmute your mic. Okay, so please go ahead. Who is first? Any question or comment?
Jorge?
Yes, Israel?
Well, there's something, you know, going through the slides that Margaret shared. One of the things that for me was very important was actually to try to adapt the questions depending on the stakeholder. And I think it for me it took some time, first because I needed to learn what was the language of different stakeholders and what they mean. Like, first, what do you mean with the question, and what the stakeholders mean with the answer. Sometimes that was a bit tricky to get it, but you know, after you go through several rounds of implementing the tool, you get the right question and you start getting the right answer. But I think for me that was one of the most important things of choosing the tool, is not only applying the tool blindly, but it's also thinking about what kind of answers you want to get out of it.
Okay. Thank you, Israel. I have Hemant and Jürgen. Hemant, please go ahead.
Hello, can you hear?
Yes, Hemant, we can hear you. Go ahead, Hemant. Hello, Hemant. Go ahead, Hemant. Hemant, we can't hear you. Okay, it seems that we have a problem here. So Jürgen, can you please go ahead?
Okay, yes.
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for the presentations tomorrow. No, I just have a small comment to Israel's presentation from Ecuador about seed-borne pests. Israel, you mentioned a seed-borne pest, several insects, flea beetle, onion weevil, as well as trips and tuber moths. I think we need to be sure what we call as seed-borne pests. Because flea beetle, onion weevil, they are infesting the potato tubers. But they will not survive during the storage. So when after storage they will come back to farmers on the field, they will not be there. So they are not seed borne because they will emerge much earlier and will do their cycle. But tumors, these are really seed borne. So you can bring them back to the field and they continue the cycle. I think this needs to be clear not to have your wrong messages as a seed, what are seed-borne pests. Especially important as we don't have any more in the entomology section at ZIP who might take care on these things. So I think we cannot call them as seed-borne. Yeah, because they are not transferred to the field and continue their cycle and continue to infest and degrade in this way the crop. That was my comment. Okay. And the same for trips. Trips are also not simple.
Okay, thank you, Jürgen. Maybe a short comment from Israel. Short one, please. Israel, you want to say something?
Yes. Okay, I thought it was
briefly,
on mute.
Please.
Yeah. Thanks so much for the comment. I also agree with you about the specification, whether they are really seed-borne pairs or not. And I will take into account for future presentations. Just to consider there are some, I'm trying to study how the social and biophysical characteristics affect seed degeneration, and therefore I would like to know what are the main pests that transmit viruses. But I agree with you. I will change that in the slides.
Okay, thank you, Hemant. You have a question? Can you, Hemant? So we have Hemant, Steve, and Ted. Hemant, are you there? Hemant? We cannot hear you. Okay, Steve, are you there?
I think people connect and do other things.
Steve?
Maybe they got, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, connected.
Steve, are you there? Steve?
Huh?
Steve Walsh, you have a question?
So she's putting the strength and weakness like she's doing.
Do you hear me? This is Peter from Ecuador.
Hello, Peter. Yes.
Amazing.
Okay. Maybe I'll just take advantage of the fact that we couldn't get other people through. If you can hear me, I'll just give a few comments about the experiences that I've had using the framework. Is that okay?
Okay, Peter, please go ahead. Please mute your mic. Goodwill, I think you are talking.
I would just say that when you implement a tool or you receive a tool, I would go to another issue of the tool compared to what Jürgen went into a very detailed. Can you hear me?
Yes, Peter.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Jürgen mentioned a very interesting issue about something very specific in his discipline. I think that's also something that you can use the tool for.
Yeah, these ones are good.
These are good.
But also, as different experts work on a seed system, the one very good issue about the framework is the way that it's you bring in different perspectives from many different stakeholders that may have very different assumptions about how a seed system should be improved. I think that was for me the main point as a biophysical scientist, to realize all these different social aspects that also exist within a seed system. So in that sense, you can go into very detailed information and components of the seed system, and it opens up your eyes to other stakeholders that may have very different assumptions about what seed quality is, or how stakeholders in a value chain may be pulling in different directions. So in that sense, I think what we need maybe to improve for using a tool as such, as it is a very complex issue to work with seed systems, is how do we actually implement this tool? We talk about a tool. In my mind, when we talk about a tool, it's something tangible, something that you have an easy implementation and you know how to use it. So we do have a user guide for how to use the tool. But I think it would be very useful for people who have not been analyzing seed systems or not aware of the tool before to improve the user guide for how actually we can implement or develop questions within this frame, this table we have of different stakeholders and different um, components of a seed system. So what questions, for me as a biophysical scientist, for me it was important to realize how you develop or the different tools that may exist for social science survey questionnaires, and how you develop questions and how you set up focal groups and not having hierarchy, inviting all people from the same value chain to the same meeting, where then you'll have smallholders not saying very much, and then having the owner of a big seed company or something like that taking all the attention and being much stronger in that in his or her ideas about what should be done. Same for men and women, the issue about gender. So from my point of view, I think it would be good to improve the user guide and also make clear what other tools exist to support the framework, so that it can be easier implemented by newcomers.
Okay, thank you very much, Peter.
Yeah.
Thank you, Peter. I think your comments are very timely because we are actually working on version 2 of the framework. So very welcome your comments. Ted, um, go ahead.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, Ted, please go ahead.
Okay. So yes, in fact, my question was somewhat along the same lines, because I was just really intrigued. I heard from Israel, we talk about the tool, and then we had the most beautiful graphs and so on coming out of this tiny little sheet of paper. And and then there was no mention of workshops, only focus group discussions and hanging out. And and then I heard Margaret talk about workshops, and so in fact, of course, I haven't read the manual, but in fact, actually, the sort of the utility of the how to use the tool is quite relevant, and it was just the question really came up because of the matrix is so tiny, but a lot of information goes into every box, I guess.
Margaret, do you want to address that comment? Margaret? Or I think I can answer the comment. Ted, I think you're right. Yes, but the idea is to use the framework as a first diagnostic tool. Then you can complement the tool with other methodologies, impact network or network analysis, market studies, etc. A lot of different tools. But as a tool for first diagnosing the seed system, I think is relevant. So I think you are right. Israel showed a lot of information, not necessarily coming from the framework, but probably from other methodologies that he used in addition to the framework. Yeah. Okay, so I think it's
Thank you.
Oh, yes.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, please. We are 9:05, so if you can stay with us maybe 10 minutes more, that would be nice. But please go ahead. Who is this guy? Who is talking?
Hi, Jorge.
Yes, Steve. Yes, please go ahead.
Thoroughly enjoyed this. Can you hear me?
Yes, Steve, we can hear you.
Yes. The point I'd like to make is that I do think it's worth sort of looking at what happened when the seed system security framework This was introduced back in 2001, and we're what, 18 years on, 17 years on, and we're still struggling to get seed system assessments written up. Yet we've done a lot of training on this. There's been a lot of support. So my point is that I would encourage us to think through how can we come up with relatively simple frameworks so that, not simple frameworks, simple formats for the write-up of these assessments. Because I feel that without having, and I've been a victim of this, I've gone and done assessments and, have not written them up because it was just an assessment to get funding for another proposal, and it was used on an internal basis. But I really think as a community, it's critically important to look at how do we get these things written up, and how do we work as a community to ensure that when we do assessments using the framework, they get written up. Because it's in the writing, in my experience, it's in the writing that it really helps us to refine the methodologies, and it really helps us to sort of recognize, at what point does the data lead to a clear finding, at what point do the findings really facilitate, in the process, at the field level, does it really facilitate, interpreting findings and taking them to a level of a recommendation. Otherwise, thank you so much for the presentation today.
Okay, Steve. I think the point that you raise is valid. Is a good one. I would say in the case of this framework, we really are trying to write and publish the results. So you can see the research paper that we just published. I think that is a major effort from the team to complete the task, I would say. I think you are right that we need to write about the diagnostics that we do, the assessment of seed systems. Having formats for doing that can be a challenge, but I think we can discuss that, Steve. If you want, you can participate in this in writing up the second version of the user guide, and we can discuss if it is feasible to include some formats on how to report the information back to the stakeholders and to other audiences. I think we need to wrap up this this webinar. So the next steps, very briefly, we want to institutionalize the framework. So that is one of the major goals of this webinar, is to start trying to institutionalize the framework. So in the case of SIP, for example, this is an example from our center from SIP. SIP is requiring to use the framework as a first step on any intervention on potato and sweet potato seed systems. So for example, Peter is probably going to do some work on seed systems of sweet potato in Haiti, and he is proposing to use the framework as a first step to understand and diagnose the existing seed systems in that country. Another example is the framework is included in these courses, everything you need to know about sweet potato, that is starting in Ghana, I think, at the end of July. So Margaret, she included the framework as one of the tools that we want to share with the participants to this course, so they will be able to use the tool to use in their own interventions. And we want to hear also examples from other clusters from Flagship 2. So it would be nice if you can share with us, especially the cluster leaders, any idea on how to use this framework in your clusters, in the crop-specific clusters, from cassava, from potato, from yam, from banana, etc. Then we want to include other tools in this RTB seed system toolbox. So this cluster CC 2.1 is developed what we call as RTB seed system toolbox, a collection of tools that will help us to design, implement, and evaluate seed interventions. And this is the first tool. The framework is the first tool. So in the next coming months, I think we will be able to develop at least a couple of other tools, probably impact network analysis, degeneration models, willingness to pay methodologies, and so on. And the idea is to launch this toolbox during the ISTRC meeting that will be in Cali in October 2018. And this will be in combination with the RTB annual meeting. So this is from my side. I don't know if you want to add anything, Margaret, Israel, or Netzai, but I think we need to close the webinar.
Okay, I
Any
have
final
raised
comments?
my hand for a few minutes now. Can I make a comment?
Yes, please go ahead.
So the question to you guys is something that we are observing in cassava and might be relevant for seed systems in general. And this is related to what we are starting to get a feeling that when you produce planting material, there is a need for adaptation of the planting material after you release to the target environment. We call this epigenetic variation. The performance of a given clone will be different the first year we send the material to the target environment compared with the second or third year because there is a lot of environmental and biological factors that affect the performance of the material even though there is no genetic changes. I think that this is something that we should pay attention in any initiative related to the production of planting material. And I would like to hear if you guys with other crops have similar experiences compared with those that we are finding in cassava.
Okay, thank you, Hernan, for your comment. In the case of potato, I've heard that before from farmers. When they buy seed, certified seed, the first generation of that seed probably it doesn't perform well. Then the next generation, the second generation, usually they get the good yields. So I've heard that before from farmers. Not from scientists, actually, not from potato scientists. So any other comment from other crops, maybe? Hernan, I would like to follow up with you on this, so maybe we can exchange some emails about this epigenetic variation because this is a personal question for me because I've heard a lot about this issue in Ecuador. So I think we need to close up this